What is up, my cutouts? Cardboard Ninja here, coming at you with a video covering the October test server updates. These are the things that Gaijin has indicated are going to change. They say, hello, survivors, standard stuff. So they decide to explain why they're making these changes before they give you the changes, but that's not exactly a good idea. So what they're saying is they're reworking traction on all surfaces. They're implementing high friction terrain. They are trying to fix the invisible walls. Turning speed of wheels was reduced, which is an interesting decision. And it depends on their turning speed on the mass of the vehicle was increased. So if you're heavier, it's gonna be harder to turn, which is already what we kind of experienced in Crossout, just turned up into the max. Vehicle suspension is going to tilt when the speed vector changes, which is basically like a visual thing. It basically means that you're going to be more top heavy and you're going to lean, and that's kind of cool. That's just cool. Handbrake mechanics were also changed. Now using handbrakes will only block the rear wheels. So right now, handbrake mechanics lock your standard wheels, but I'm sorry, lock your steering wheels. Standard wheels continue to spin. Now they're saying no. For some reason, that's only going to work on your rear wheels, right? They're saying the cards with how will cars with standard wheels, that would be standard in steering, vary from pure steering. They're saying vehicles with standard wheels should have better grip on the road and tend to skid less frequently. The handbrake has to be activated to make sharp turns. Cars that use only steering wheels have smaller turning radius, which is what we experience now, but they tend to skid more often. That's what we get right now. For those of us who don't know, you tend to drift more often if you're using all steering wheels. So I don't know why they would bother to say that. But now, with the changes to the handbrake, those steering wheels, when you hit the brake, the front steering wheels will still spin. The rears will not. They have their own comments on this, but the reasons why they're making these changes, they're trying to make the handling of wheeled vehicles more interesting and versatile. They're like, oh, the current arcade feeling may have its advantages, which is true for those of us who play Crossout. If you're watching this video, you're one of them. We enjoy the game the way it feels. That's just it. So they're saying the current arcade feeling may have its advantages, like, fun, but in reality is the new visuals, it doesn't fit with what players see in front of them. So they're coming out with this new visual update, and they think that the wheels need to respond differently to match those visuals instead of match a type of gameplay. This is a very interesting design decision, one that's going to be mirrored continually as I read through these patch notes. Because one thing that needs to be, I personally think, I try to keep my opinions out of things, but I personally believe that a game should be fun. The number one game in the world right now is a game that I don't play, but kids love it. It's called Fortnite. And the reason why isn't because it's good. You know it's not good. I know it's not good. The people who play it know it's not good, but it is fun. They play it because it's fun. We play Crossout because it's fun. And nerfing the fun isn't a good idea just to make things match a visual update that someone came out with. So, continuing on tracks, they're saying the turning speed of track vehicles has been reduced. For those of us who don't know, the turning speed of track vehicles is low. It's not, with the exception of maybe small tracks. Yeah, it's already pretty low. The dependence of tracked vehicles turning speed on mass has been increased. I don't know why they would do that. Okay, the turning radius for some tracks builds has been slightly changed. Well, that would be the result of changing turning speed, and fixed bug due to which the car would abruptly change its direction after running into a bump or other obstacle. Now, I often mention this in other videos leading up to this, where I mentioned that Omni wheels are either very bad and in D tier, or are obscenely good and in around A tier, because there is a glitch that exists or an exploit that exists that basically makes them unbelievably good. This is the exploit, apparently. It looks like they're trying to fix it, and they may succeed in doing that. Mechanical legs, by the way, so yeah, the track changes are also very bad. From what I've seen on Reddit and from what I've seen on videos online, these changes are not very good to some of the most fun builds in Crossout. And we'll go over all of this in summary later. Mechanical legs. First of all, we like to get rid of old features that didn't correspond to the in-game physics. These changes include vulnerability to pushing and difficulties when climbing slopes. By the way, those are very good things. Anybody who's ever played Crossout knows legs are horrible at climbing slopes. If you had ML200s, even if you were trying, even if you had, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your build. Going up any slope, it would say you were going 40 kph when in reality you and I both know you're going like 20 or 10. You couldn't go up hills. It takes forever for legs to climb slopes. So that's a good thing to be fixed. Vulnerability to pushing, that should have been fixed years and years and years and years ago. Legs right now, as you know, if you crash into a leg build and you are using anything except for a hover, you can push them around. So yeah, that's a good. I hope that gets fixed. They're also aiming to refine acceleration and braking of the builds with mechanical legs, adding inertia and smoothness to the movements, which is a bad thing. It means that you're going to turn even slower. What's been done, vehicles on mechanical legs have become more resistant to pushing. Now, vehicles equipped with mechanical legs can climb steep slopes. The acceleration of the legs on different axes, I think is what they meant to say, and the rate of turn around its axis are now independent of the current speed of the car. The legs used to behave very slow when you started moving, but extremely fast if you started maneuvering while moving. Now they have roughly the same acceleration at any speed, making them similar to hovers. So this is true. This is also one of the interesting things of why if you used a light cabin on hovers, on ML200 legs, and most people did not do this, you actually could turn and aim very well. But when using a heavy cabin on ML200s, it was very bad. So they're normalizing this. They're probably going to take something that was average to good and something that was horrible, horrendous to horrible, and put it in the middle somewhere to be just bad. The speed penalties and other parameters responsible for the acceleration and inertia of the legs have been reconfigured. Now, super heavy builds on mechanical legs should be just as slow as those on wheels, but they can still turn around relatively quickly and push just about anything. We'll see how that turns out. I think that one of the reasons why leg builds are used is not because of their pushing ability. Obviously, it never has been, because you get pushed around like you're a child. The reason why they're used is for accuracy. It's to keep people in front of you. It's to strafe and so on and so forth. That's been the historical use of legs. They're trying to change that to be worse. Continuing on, augers and omni wheels. Omnis reduce the rate of spread increase by 33% when firing or when turning the weapons. This bonus decreases proportionally with other mounted parts, so you can't just bring other Omni wheels and some other things. But yeah, okay. Spread rate increased by 33% is pretty good. Sure. Meat grinders, the damage of the augers increases with the increase of the vehicle's mass. If the vehicle's mass is less than 5,000 kilograms, the movement part deals base. The multiplier increases linearly up to 300% of the damage dealt at the vehicle's mass of 15,000. So now meat grinders actually, the melee damage meat grinders do increases. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. Most people don't attempt to use the meat grinder as a melee. They just use it as either a catch or they use it as a solid movement part to protect their undercarriage, worm builds and the like, etc. Increases the strafe speed on these movement parts when the car is already going in a straight line. I think that already does that. Oh no, it doesn't do that. I think they're implementing this because the exploit that they're removing above. Anyway, hovers. Why do we make these changes? Hovers have long had a reputation. This is, by the way, is the most controversial thing of this entire update. If you haven't already read it, if you haven't already experienced it, if you don't already know, this is what everyone's complaining about. So here we go. Hovers have long had a reputation for being rather toxic movement parts because of some features that enable survivors to create sideways builds or to instantly accelerate on lightweight vehicles. We would like to get rid of these features and make the movement part not so versatile. Here we go. Here we go, boys. Solving the problem with sideways builds. I'm air quoting because there's actually quotes around sideways. We'll also remove a barrier for newcomers who will like to play with hovers but inevitably face the need to build sideways builds. Our other objective is to improve the handling of the vehicles on hovers using a gamepad, which will be particularly important for console players. What has been done? What have you done? Refine the suspension animation of hovers. Now the builds on hovers will tend to tilt more from acceleration and speed. More on this later. Stabilization of the car with hovers now depends on the shape of the hover base. The wider and longer it is, the more stable the build will be. The hover base is a rectangle that includes all the hovers mounted to the vehicle. The size of the hover The hover base also determines how much the build leans when moving. So for those of us who don't know, there are people who are like Iron Dog, there are people who are like Mar, many people usually try to get a sideways hover build, and their hovers are very narrow, and they line up everything behind the on that narrow axis. And they do this because it protects everything. And people have to shoot through your engine, they have to shoot through your front armor, they have to shoot through your spaced armor, they have to shoot through so much just to get to your cabin that you're actually more tanky in many instances than tank builds, even without any hit points, because no one can directly hit your cabin in the first place. That is the advantage of the sideways hover build. It always has been the advantage. And it is the current hover meta at the highest ends of play. There's no such thing as a front-facing meta after pretty much at any power score. So they're looking to fix, aka kill that. I've seen videos and checked Reddit on this. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, so basically, if you have a thin hover, you can flip by doing nothing. Just flying your vehicle. You can flip upside down, just flying it, due to this lack of stability and the lean that they're adding. And also, they are apparently changing the, again, with this hover base that they're talking about, they're making it so it's more narrow than it used to be. Right now, it is effectively impossible to flip a hover. You just can't flip over unless you're missing multiple hovers and you are very unstable. Now, you have to be wide. Even if you're a sideways hover, you must be wide. But more on this later, because you won't be a sideways hover anymore due to other reasons. Continuing on, Icarus 4 and Icarus 7 are now more clearly divided into archetypes. Icarus 4, the basis for a medium build. This hover has higher tonnage, durability, and stabilization, but at lower acceleration and top speed. For those of us who don't know, this has been the case in Crossout basically forever. They normalized this only in like most recent iterations for maybe 6 months, where both the Icarus 4s and the Icarus 7s both have a top speed of 80 kph when they brought, 75 kph when they brought the Icarus 7s down 5 kilometers an hour to the top speed of the Icarus 4s. So this was the way it was before. There you go. Icarus 7's the basis for a lightweight build. It has lower tonnage and durability, lower stabilization, but higher acceleration and top speed. This has always been the case, but from what I can tell from the test server, they increased this to like 100 kph. It's pretty crazy. As they say, we understand the new parameters are forcing some players to change their hovers in order to keep their vehicles effective. After the update, we will launch a special compensation system. Each player will be able to exchange your Icarus 4s and Icarus 7s as many times as they have had parts on their account. During the exchange, the upgrade of the part will also be retained. So that means if you have a bunch of Icarus 7s, they're like, why don't you just change them to Icarus 4s? You'll keep your fusion on them. Why don't you just change them? This is a terrible, terrible change, but we'll continue on. New vehicle controls. Remember how I said that sideways hovers were going away regardless of the change above? Well, that's because of these. With this update, the controls of cars on movement parts with the strafing function will be changed. This means hovers, all mechanical legs, augers, and omnis. From now on, the driving direction of such cars will always correspond to the direction in which your camera is looking. You can turn the vehicle by rotating the camera. You can turn the vehicle by rotating your camera, but you can also turn the vehicle using special rotation keys, which will replace the strafe keys. The maximum turning angle used by those keys will be 45 degrees, which means you cannot do it. That 90 degrees is sideways hover. The strafe function will be removed, and the turning keys will be implemented. The forward-backward movement and strafe will work the same way as before. You will also be able to customize key bindings to your likings in the settings. Basically, they're saying you can use these new buttons, but the old buttons are gone. In order to look around without turning the car itself, you can use the key responsible for blocking the rotation of weapon barrels. What they're saying is, for those of us who aren't familiar, if you hold down Alt, if you're on PC in Crossout, it locks your weapons and you can free look. What they're saying is, free look button still exists. Deal with that. For your convenience, we've improved the key responsible for placing the car in the center. Its use in combat allows you to quickly remove the camera in the opposite direction and force the weapon to turn in the same direction. It means you can keep moving forward while also looking back and shooting back. All right. We understand that such changes may feel unusual first, but through inner tests, we found that they ultimately add more dynamics and make the handling more comfortable once the player gets used to them. Oh, doggy, we're gonna go over this. We're gonna have to loop back to this. We're gonna have to loop back. Anything else? The breaker. You can also check out the new perk of the breaker shotgun on the test server. Now, if the weapon doesn't fire or gets overheated for 0.8 seconds, the next shot will have significantly increased range, reducing spread and increased damage. The damage bonus depends on the number of radiators. The more of them, the higher the bonus. The previous perk of the breaker didn't match the weapon's archetype, and in some cases felt useless or unfair, especially before the Omni appeared in the game. It didn't work in every game situation, but when it did, it was too effective. The new perk is designed to solve these problems. It should be more versatile and won't depend as much on the opponent in a duel. All right, so I don't know. They seem to constantly and consistently want to change up the breaker. The breaker is, and up until now, probably the best shotgun. It really is. If you're going for max power score play and you want to power people down, the breaker is amazing. For those of us who don't know, the breaker is a relic shotgun, and its current perk is that once it takes lethal damage, instead of being removed and destroyed, it goes invulnerable. And it goes invulnerable for like 1 second. And this is amazing for many, many different reasons. It is amazing because of the fact that it made it scorpion proof, it made it typhoon proof, it made it cannon proof. So it was basically a cannon proof shotgun because most people would aim at your shotguns and try to remove them. You fire. If you miss or if the breaker takes a little bit of damage, you're fine. If you fire and you hit the breakers directly and would strip it, instead, it takes one hit from one of your shots and then basically stays at half-life for a second, making it unremoved. That's the reason why the breaker is so strong. They're nerfing the shit out of that. They're calling it a change. I'm calling it a nerf. I don't know what the significantly increased range of that one shot is, but you'll note that the damage bonus that you get is increased by the number of radiators that you have. The reason for this, it would be because they're trying to invert. They're trying to not make another Gravistar with this change. Right now, the Gravistar is you want to get that reload in so that you can keep overheating your opponent. The breaker getting this increased range and damage will happen less frequently with more radiators, which is the reason why it would scale up with more radiators. That's the reason why they're doing that. As for this change, I don't think this is a very good change. I think it's a terrible change. This is horrible, horrible news. It's a terrible change. Why would they do this? Why would you do this? The point of being a shotgun or having a shotgun is being good in close range. It's not just being good, being the best. And being a relic, which means it's the best shotgun, it should be the best at close range. I don't understand this change. I don't think this is a good idea. I do believe that this would be the nail in the breaker's coffin. Personally, that's just my personal opinion. Because while breakers are really good right now, this is a terrible change. Making them strippable is kind of bad. Like, that's the whole purpose of the breaker. It's the reason why people like to use the breaker over the Jormungandr. Anyway, continue on. Spark 3. The one-time power reduction reduced from 9% to 7.5%. I think what they mean by that is instead of stacking 9% per charge, it's stacking 7.5% per charge. However, the maximum negative effect, in addition to that, the maximum negative effect is taken down to 60%, down from 72%. The flash, I don't know why they did this. The one-time power reduction and increase in reload time is reduced from 6% to 5%, maxed at also 60%. Basically, it's going to take longer for the Spark and the Flash to stack up. Curiously, what's not here is the Annihilator. So the Annihilator will still drain power at the same rate, apparently, maybe. But Spark and Flash are getting a nerf to their ability to nerf their opponents. All right. Not sure why they would do that, but fair enough. Let's go back. This vehicle controls movement parts. I don't have a rant prepared. I apologize. So I'm just going to freestyle it. I went to Reddit, and it looks like a tire fire with very, very, very few exceptions. The overwhelming vast majority of people hate this change. There are things that I've read that, and you guys can pop over to the Reddit anytime. I'll put the link in the description below to read from the test server what people are saying. But the vomitorium there is indicating that this killed a game called, it was not Crimecraft, it was Robocraft. So for those of us who don't know, the game that came out before Crossout, not by Gaijin, by some other group called Robocraft, is very much like Crossout. You get to make your own build, you get to put structure parts on your build the way you want. You get to shape your own car. You get to make whatever you want. Standard stuff. It looks very similar to Crossout, but the game died. And one of the defining factors and the reason why the player base dropped off was because they changed their movement scheme to this. This movement scheme is awful. When they said that driving directions of cars will always correspond to the direction in which your camera is looking, that's not what they mean to say. What they say is the driving direction of your car will always be the front of your cabin. Cabins have a front face and a rear face. What they're saying is it is your front face. And if you look around with your mouse, it's going to force the front face of your vehicle to be where you're looking, period. And if you use these brand new strafe keys, air quotes, strafe keys, you can't have that differ by more than 45 degrees. So this means that this is the death of the sideways hover, period. 100% death of sideways hovers, death of sideways omnis, actually. So for those of us out there who don't know, there are many omni builds. These are your strafey wheels that are sideways builds because of the fact that you can get some really narrow builds. You can have interesting control schemas. Combine that with the exploit that allows you to keep your momentum when changing directions and all that stuff like that. Omni wheels work very similar to a grounded hover. Not anymore. So this is a nerf, massive nerf to all Omni or all Omni builds, all hover builds, and many spider builds. Even though it's not so much talked about, spider builds, usually you want to keep your front to your enemy. Usually. But just so we're clear, that's not always the case. The whole purpose of spider builds and the whole purpose of the International Space Station-esque builds where you have a whole bunch of floating parts is so that you shoot someone, and then if things are looking bad and people are focusing, let's say your right weapon and you're using Typhoons, or you're using Scorpions, you're not using Scorpions on legs, but you get the idea. You have a right side and a left side. And if people are focusing one side of your weapons too much, you turn your build, and you tilt it so they can't hit those weapons. I've done so far, when I've used spiders, I've literally turned 90 degrees. I've been like, no, you're never going to take my gun, fire a shot into my left side. I'm not going to give you my right gun, right? It's a strategy. It increases the durability of your build. It increases the longevity of your build. And this allows you to then snap back afterwards and fire, yada, yada, yada. You've all played Crossout. If you've gotten this far into these patch notes and are listening to me, bitch, you've all played, you understand the reasons. They're removing that. Straight up. Dead ass. This change is among the worst I could possibly imagine. And once again, as I said, one view at the Reddit pages concurs with that. Many people are saying, oh yeah, there's some good changes and some bad changes. Almost to the man, the bad changes are, they're completely and totally against this control schema change. And I agree, personally. They're mad not just because of the fact that sideways hovers are getting nerfed into the ground once again, or being removed. Sorry, correction, being removed. They're mad because these controls are just toxicity in and of itself. Having your hover always face where you're aiming, or sorry, having your build always face forward is not an advantage to anybody. We don't use that. It's basically a self-correcting nature. So for those of us who are brand new to hovers, and it takes like a week or two of playing hovers to actually get used to hover controls just in general, not just sideways hovers, but just using hovers in general. One of the things is that keeping your build facing your enemy is hard because people with, let's say, Reapers, or people with Millers, or people with cannons or Scorpions or whatever, they hit your build and your hover spins because it accepts that inertia and spins and aims the wrong direction. And it's actually there's actually a very large skill gap and a skill ceiling in controlling your build under fire as a hover. When people don't know this, but if you ever see a hover player and they're like able to maintain their angles on you and maintain a shot on you even while taking fire, that takes an absurd amount of skill. And with this change, that skill would be gone. All that skill and that ability that those players learned, like bothered to get, that's not necessary because your vehicle, your hover, will always attempt to face where you're looking now. Okay, so that's good. That makes it so new players don't have to worry about their build being shot out from underneath them, spinning them around, making them look all in crazy directions, which is what you deal with now because it's no longer free movement. The movement is permanently locked to your camera's direction facing. The downside to this is control. You lose an insane amount of control over your vehicle with this. With this, you can't. You looking in one direction, moving in another direction. They're saying use free look. Use free look, bitch. There's always the alt key, is what they're trying to say. But that's never been the case. Most people don't use free look to look around. They quickly look around as they move, and having to add alt to that just to keep your situational awareness is just bad. Just cancerous. Most people don't like this change, and I'm fit to agree with that. This change for the Omnis, on all legs. I don't know how. Probably the camera controls probably don't work like that when the Omnis are in wheel mode. But these changes are terrible, and well, in my opinion, terrible. Leave your thoughts in the comments below on how you feel about these changes. Check to see if you've actually existed on the test server. I was going to. I'm sorry. I'll just admit this now. I didn't make it to the test server. I tried to. I didn't make it because I got caught in Dark Tide. They had the exact same test server time as, well, the new Warhammer playtest. And I want to play Warhammer, so I was like, I'm sorry, guys. Like, I'm not going to test it. But from what I can tell, this isn't good. They are increasing the speed, from what I can tell, of blue hovers from 70 to 100 kilometers an hour. I don't know what they're thinking, because one of the things is, if you are able to move at 100 kilometers an hour, it doesn't matter that your base is going to be slightly wider and that you're playing a purely forward-facing hover. It won't matter. It just won't. Nova hovers are going to become significantly more powerful if they weren't already. They're the only viable front-facing hover. Now they're going to be the only hover. That's terrible. I think that their idea is saying that they're making these changes for the sake of new players. It's like, oh, new players it's gonna be easier for them to get into hovers. No, it won't. The ceiling to get into hovers has been changed at that point. You're the only cabin that'll work is one, and it's one of the most expensive cabins in the game. So that doesn't feel new player friendly to me at all. Yeah. Anybody who's seen this? Oh, right. This change also completely obliterates, this camera change completely obliterates forward-facing double forward-facing guns. So if you have a build and you have your guns in line with each other, and typically what you would normally try to do is walk at a 90-degree angle and allow yourself to like flank like a battleship. Battleship flanking is gone. You can't do that. Anyone who's on a legged vehicle or anyone who's on a hover vehicle has to side mount their guns, which means horizontally mount your guns side by side, because you can no longer have them front back oriented. And what this also means is if you have them mounted not directly side by side but staggered, front right back rear or front left back right, something like that, you won't be able to fire at all when someone goes to your left, assuming you have front left back right, or to your right if front right back left. So this heavily affects the placement of weapons on builds, and those would be viable builds. And I'm not even talking about hovers, I'm talking about legs. Yeah, this is really bad, in my opinion. So how I feel about all of these changes, from what I've heard, let me just cover something about the wheels and these new terrain parts. From what I can tell, anybody who knows, if you have dragging parts and you attempt to cross a bridge or any solid structure in Crossout, right now, it can kill you because your car starts to jump, it starts to get stopped, it starts to flip. It's terrible. You all know what it's like. Having dragging parts is torture. They're increasing that. From what I can read and from what I can tell from what's happening on the test server, yeah, it'll stop you outright. So like if you have low-hanging, let's say, wedges on your build or low-hanging melee parts and they hit one of these new parts, you're going to come to a dead-ass stop. So that's also bad. Yeah, all in all, this is probably the worst patch I've heard of in Crossout. I try not to be negative. There's usually a lot of good stuff that comes with it, but this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good at all. I understand they're trying to kill sideways hovers. This will kill it, but it will also kill the game in the process. I do believe that wholeheartedly. Because this would the change to wheel movement parts to make everything turn worse. That's literally what they said. They straight up said, "Look, if you're in a heavier build, it's gonna turn worse. If you're in a lighter build, it'll turn okay. But just so you know, standard builds with steering wheel in front, regular wheels in back, those are going to be harder to steer. Oh, and by the way, steering wheels in front, steering wheels in back, while they're already easier to steer, those are going to be slightly harder. And also, it sounds like they're trying to up your drifting when you use pure steering wheels. So I don't know what they're going for here. Also, builds, 6-wheel builds. These are your well, not your meta, but one of your mainstays in Crossout are steering wheels in front and back, and your middle wheels are standard wheels. Those are going to be different because your standard wheels in the middle will no longer be the ones that hold when you brake. Only your rear wheels, whichever wheels I assume are most furthest to the rear of your vehicle, are going to lock, and now those standard wheels in the middle won't lock. So whatever, like they're coming up with some very interesting mechanical changes that I don't know if they're going to be fun. This is the thing. I touched upon this a little bit earlier in this video. I'm just going to end with this, I suppose. I don't want this too long. You guys aren't going to watch this long anyway. But Crossout needs to be fun. All games need to be fun. And the real question that needs to be asked about all of this balancing, all of these changes, all of this, is it going to be fun? Is it going to be fun to only have front-facing hovers? Part of the game's fun is making whatever you want, and whether or not it is balanced is kind of an afterthought. Yeah, people are going to gravitate to the International Space Station sideways hovers, and because they're the best, but they're also kind of fun. Like being able to come up with that idea in your head and then make that into a build and have that build proliferate and propagate into the game is part of the fun of Crossout. It really is. Forcing players to only use hovers in a front-facing direction, and then, you know, locking your camera, that's a restriction that is really, really brutal. Losing strafe keys is... So here's the reason why they're losing strafe keys. You're not going to need them. A and D will strafe your vehicle for you instead of Q and E. And they're going to strafe your vehicle for you because of the fact that you're going to be force locked and looking forward. And then Q and E turning into up to a 45-degree angle twist is just stupid, because the second that you stop pushing those buttons, the vehicle is going to turn back towards the way you look. The control scheme is even more arcadey. They're saying that the control schemes right now are arcadey, and they're like, that doesn't fit that vehicle, that doesn't fit the look of the game now. We don't want things to feel like an arcade. But having your vehicle's movement tied to your camera is War Thunder. They also, by the way, as a side note, Gaijin owns War Thunder. just so you know. But that's War Thunder. If you played War Thunder and you fly your plane around, you have to hold down the Alt key to look around, and then you fly your vehicle. You fly your plane if you're playing War Thunder with a plane. On, you know, there's tanks, they don't operate that way. But yeah, if you fly a plane, you fly it with your mouse. And that's what they're trying to implement here with all vehicles that typically you wouldn't do that on. Anything but tracks, basically. Tracks will be the only things that will maintain your ability to move in one direction and shoot in another. Which is it's a bad change. I don't think it's fun. I just don't think it's a good change. None of this feels like a really good change. So, well, leave your comments down below. Do you guys feel that this is going to be a good change to Crossout? Do you think it should happen? I personally don't. I think that this could kill a game. I don't mean to be a naysayer. I don't want to overestimate how badly a change is going to affect a game, but this is something that over time will cause people. This something is potentially something that over time will cause a game to bleed players. Because there are things that can happen that people dislike to such an extraordinary degree that they just say, you know what, I'm gonna play something else. And even players who've played a game for a very long time can be pushed away from a game when this happens. It's how games lose concurrency. And I'm not gonna say that this is the straw that's gonna break the camel's back, but it feels like it could be. There are a lot of people who will definitely hate these changes. And if they go live, it could directly negatively impact game concurrency. Personally, myself, you guys haven't seen me play on Twitch in a good long time because I'm simply not playing Crossout and taking a little bit of a break. Apparently, real life is kicking in. But with this change coming in, I don't feel confident in saying that it's something I'd want to return to. Because, again, I don't play hovers for fun. I play, like, you know, wheel builds things like that for fun usually. But I want my hover builds to kind of be there, and having to scrap all my hover builds and start over, whatever. It's a building game, but Jesus, like they need to open this up for more testing. Period. Like if they do want to release this into the game, they should, but on the caveat of that they're going to roll it back in 1 week, because this is not something that you want to test on a beta that not everyone got to play. This is something that you want your entire player base to test. Give it to them for a week and say, here's a week, and in addition to that, here's a week of premium time, because we know that this is going to be cancerous to you guys. Tell us how you actually feel, and release an in-game survey and get some actual data from the actual players who actually play the game, not the people who just managed to get into the test server, because this is something that is too large to just say, oh yeah, by the way, we're changing literally everything that there is in Crossout, and yeah, we're changing literally everything. We're just going to pull the rug out from underneath you, and peace, have fun. You shouldn't do that. This is a little bit too much. This isn't a part change. This isn't the update to the breaker or the spark, which is, you know, balance pass. This is changing how the game is played. And you can't just, you can, it's just that it can kill a game. So imagine like you're playing Overwatch or you're playing any other game, you're playing Valorant, and they're like, oh yeah, we're changing your grenade key from, you know, whatever button it is to manually bound the enter key. So we found that people can't do certain things, so now you got to press the enter key to pull out one of your abilities. Just deal with that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's a bigger change than necessary, or, you know, it is something that defines a game, and the underlying mechanics of a game are what defines a game. It's not the items that you get. It's not the guns that you wield. It's how the game controls. It's how the game handles. It's how your WASD keys function, are the most basic thing in a video game. And changing that is very, very major. This isn't a minor change. This isn't something that can be overlooked. This is something that should be tested on the real gaming community itself before making it permanent. And that is my largest contribution to this. Gaijin, if you ever watch my videos, I'm sure you don't. I'm sure no one does. And if you do, you probably don't watch to the end of the video, which means I should probably put this at the beginning. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to edit this. I'm just going to do it live. If you take anything from any of my videos, if you ever watch any of my videos at all, if anybody actually listens to me, you need to test this on live players, not a beta, not a test server. Make this live for a week. Give people premium time to compensate them, and then roll it back. Give them a survey and say, hey, by the way, did you like those changes? Or are you going to Alt F4 and uninstall this shit? Because this is so major that you need to do that. Anyway, if you guys have stuck with me for so long, thanks for listening to us chat ramble. Go ahead and leave your thoughts on the comments below. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to pop in and say, yep, Crossout's dead or something like that. But yeah, if you like the changes, can you explain to me why you actually would like these changes? If you dislike these changes, just go ahead and fill my comment section with your vitriol. All right, guys, thank you for watching another of my videos. Peace.